real quick, if you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. Also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Campfire Cult Pod for free. It'll really help us reach listeners just like you. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. And finally, if you don't mind, please share, rate, and review wherever possible. Welcome, dear listener, to the Campfire Cult Podcast. From a camper van deep in the haunted woods, I bring you first-hand accounts of chilling encounters with the paranormal. Step into the night and take a peek into the realm where reality and the supernatural collide. My name is Jazz, and I'll be your host. Welcome back, campers. Tonight isn't just any night around the campfire. This is episode 50, the big 50. And if you've been with us from the start, or even if you're just joining now, thank you. Thank you for stepping into the dark places where whispers linger and shadows dance, and for following the flickering lights at the edge of the woodline. 50 episodes deep, and we've barely scratched the surface of the strange. Tonight, we're venturing further into the haunted woods to explore one of my favorite cryptids. We're exploring something old, something primal, something that doesn't just haunt the woods, it stalks them. From the spine-chilling tale that kicked it all off in Michigan in 1887 to the modern-day encounters that feel too close for comfort, we'll uncover why this creature isn't just any cryptid. It's the Dogman. So grab your flashlight and stay close to the fire, because the Dogman is waiting, and tonight, we're ready for it. Let's begin. It was 1887. The place? Wexford County, Michigan. Back then, the forests were thick and wild. Logging camps dotted the region, filled with rugged men who lived hard and worked harder, men who feared very little. But there were two lumberjacks, names lost to time, who saw something in those woods that no axe could cut through, and no man could explain. They'd gone off the main trail, deep into the pines, when they caught sight of a figure standing upright on two legs. At first, they thought it was just a man. Tall, broad, hunched forward a bit. But then it turned. Its face was canine, long snout, fangs, eyes that didn't blink, covered in dark fur from head to toe, and towering well over 7 feet tall. It didn't speak. It didn't growl. It just watched. And then it ran, on two legs, deeper into the woods, vanishing without a sound. The two men made it back to camp, pale as ghosts. They told their story, and were never seen again. Some say they quit and fled the state. Others say they never made it out of that forest alive. But one thing's for sure, that was the first recorded sighting of what we now call the Dogman. And it sure wasn't the last. Next, a teen's winter retreat turns terrifying when glowing red eyes stalk the woods.
This happened to me when I was a kid at a sleepaway camp, and it still sends shivers down my spine. I've always had a passion for the supernatural and the idea of cryptids roaming the forests, but I've kept my guard up ever since this encounter. To set the scene, I was on a winter camping retreat with my church called Ice Camp. We traveled to a place called Camp Mishindo, located outside of Hillsdale, Michigan. The first night was pretty uneventful. We got to explore the campgrounds at night and settle into our cabins. But all the fun stopped when we were told never to explore the grounds alone after dark, or the monsters would get us. For a bunch of rowdy teenage boys, we just laughed it off and went to bed. The morning was calm, but one important detail. My cabin was across a large lake, connected to the main lodge and other cabins by a narrow footbridge. At breakfast in the main dining hall, one of the other cabins told us they hadn't gotten any sleep the night before. Something had been howling near an area called the Western Town. My cabin didn't believe them for a second. We said it was probably coyotes or maybe wolves, since gray wolf sightings had been reported nearby. But the kids telling the story were visibly shaken. They insisted it wasn't anything natural. We joked it was Bigfoot. They told us to shut the hell up, and we did. As the day went on, our counselor kept us busy with activities. Everything felt normal until night fell. Around midnight, we set up a bonfire to reflect on the sermon. Afterward, we just sat around talking. We heard coyotes yipping in the distance and thought nothing of it. But then, everything went silent. Suddenly, we heard this deep guttural howl. It sounded like someone being murdered, mixed with a wolf howl. We all jumped, but curiosity got the better of us. My counselor, 2 other cabin mates, and I grabbed a 200 lumen flashlight and headed into the woods to investigate. At first, nothing. But then at the farthest point the flashlight could reach, we saw 2 pairs of glowing red eyes staring back at us. As they got closer, we thought they were wolves, until we realized the way they moved was all wrong. It was more like a person crawling on all 4s. My counselor told us to back away slowly, but the figures kept coming. Then the second one stood up on 2 legs and charged. We bolted. We screamed for our cabin mates to get back to the cabin. At first, they didn't understand why we were running. Then they heard the howl, and they ran too. We tore across the footbridge, thinking maybe whatever it was wouldn't follow us. But halfway across, we heard the wood creaking a lot, like something heavy was on it. That was it, full panic. We ran straight to the cabin, slammed the door, and bolted it shut. Whatever had followed us was now circling the cabin. We were freaking out. Then it looked into the window and I saw it. It had a humanoid body, but lanky, and the head wasn't like a Sasquatch, which we thought it might be when we first saw them. It was the head of a wolf or wolf-like dog, like a giant husky or German shepherd. We heard scraping along the walls and heavy footsteps throughout the night, and none of us slept. Finally, around dawn, the noises stopped. Whatever it was had left. I got up early and walked to the dining hall. That's when I saw them, deep claw marks gouged into the wood, and a massive set of footprints leading back into the woods. Ever since then, I've refused to go back to a sleepaway camp, because whatever I saw that night, I know it's still out there.
Up next, in rural Tennessee, a teen encounters a towering black creature with yellow eyes, twice.
When I was in 7th grade in eastern Tennessee, I was outside with my dog, lying on a dirt mound and watching the clouds to pass the time. It was around 5:30 p.m. when my dog suddenly started barking and pulling at her leash. We lived out in the countryside, with woods surrounding one half of our house. I tried to hush my beagle, but she wouldn't stop. I stood up and looked in the direction she was staring. I said, "Look, there isn't anything there." As soon as I said that, a large black creature with a dog-like body sprinted out of the woods. Its fur was thin and so black it shimmered with a pearlescent hue, almost purple in the light. Its eyes were a mid-shade of yellow. The legs were bent backward, and the hands were long and slender. Standing upright, it was about 7 feet tall. When it dropped down to all 4s, its back had a sharp, aggressive hunch, but its movement remained smooth, almost effortless. Every step it took felt intentional, as if it had mapped its path before moving. While it sprinted, it turned its head toward me, like it knew I was there but didn't care. Then it leapt over a 4-foot cattle fence like it was nothing. I'm a senior in high school now, and just last summer I had another experience. I was working with my dad in his shed. He works on motors and that kind of stuff. And I'd left my phone in there. My friend was spending the night, so we walked back down to the shed together to get it. It was around 10 o'clock, pitch black outside, and the same time of year as my first encounter. We stood at the door of the shed, fumbling with the key. That's when we heard rustling in the woods. It was faint, like the breeze moving through the leaves, but it felt different. We both heard it. We turned our flashlights toward the brush, and that's when we saw it. There was a pitch-black shape standing just beyond the edge of the brush. The yellow eyes still haunt me every time I think about them. My friend whispered, You see that, right? But by then, I was already sprinting toward the house. Seeing it again, just standing there, watching us, shattered something in me. It was so still, so silent. The moment I got inside, I broke down. I've never had such an intense reaction to anything before. Since then, every time I go into the woods, I feel like something is watching me. I know it sounds crazy. I haven't told anyone, not until now. This is the first time I've ever tried to reach out, hoping someone else out there might have seen what I've seen.
Up next, two eerie encounters, years apart, suggest something unnatural stalks the Appalachian woods.
These two incidents happened almost a decade apart. I can't say for sure they're related, but it seems reasonable to at least entertain the idea. The first story took place at my cousin's trailer, just a couple houses down from mine. We live in a rural town at the foot of the Appalachian region in Southwest Virginia, so there's plenty of forest around us. We were playing hide and seek and everything was going fine, until I tagged my cousin and made him the seeker. He hated seeking, so instead of playing, he quit and sat on his front porch. It was around midnight, maybe a little earlier, pitch black outside, the perfect time to scare someone. My cousin's friend, my brother and I decided to get some revenge on him for being a sore loser. The plan was simple: lure him to the edge of the woods and have my brother jump out and scare him. So we got to it. We told him we heard something moving in the woods and he followed us to check it out. As we walked along the edge of the trees, we could hear something inside the forest moving with us. I looked at my cousin's friend and grinned, thinking it was just my brother beyond the tree line. Then, out of nowhere, my brother jumped out from the side of the trailer, screaming and roaring. We all screamed and panicked. He got us good. We were still laughing about it when we heard something else. Something much worse. A horrifying scream echoed from deep in the forest behind us. It sounded like a man calling for help. The pitch shifted, and I swear I heard it clearly say, "Help!" After about 5 seconds of those human-like screams, it turned into the most guttural howl I've ever heard. We ran inside, slammed the door, and my cousin rushed to the window to see if we could see it. We don't know what made that noise. Sure, there are farms around. Maybe a cow was being attacked by coyotes or something else common in rural America. But I've never heard anything like it before. Or since. Fast forward about 9 years, 2013. I was coming home late from work, driving through that same area. Suddenly, I saw two glowing orange eyes staring at me from the side of the road. I thought it might be a fox or maybe a dog. As I got closer, I realized this was no normal animal. It was a massive, black wolf. This thing was huge. Even on all fours, it was nearly as tall as my car. Its back legs were long, powerful, almost kangaroo-like. The front legs were shorter and thinner, strange proportions for any animal I'd ever seen. It darted across the road in front of me and leapt over a fence like it was nothing. When I got home, I casually told my family, well, I finally saw the werewolf that made that noise all those years ago. I don't really believe it was a werewolf, but I also can't say it wasn't.
Wild, this is now our second story of the evening coming from Appalachia, and I'm wondering what you think. Let me know in the comments. Real quick, when I'm away from the campfire and not producing this show, I'm a brand designer and coffee roaster. This year I launched my own coffee brand called Outlands Coffee. If you love damn good coffee and want to support a fiercely independent small business while also supporting this podcast, head over to outlandscoffee.com and give us a shot. I roast to order, single origin perfection alongside a couple of bold, adventurous blends, crafted for those who take their coffee as seriously as their campfire stories. Here in Washington, we don't just believe in Bigfoot, we believe in great coffee too. Try it for yourself. Use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order. Now, back to the show. Next, two terrifying encounters in rural Wisconsin, one at 100 miles per hour, the other face to face.
I've had two encounters with this thing. First, I saw the beast in Wausau, Wisconsin on September 21st, 2008. It was sometime around 1 or 2 a.m. I was driving on a 2-lane road with farmland on both sides. I was doing about 100 miles per hour when I passed right next to it, just a few feet away in the opposite lane, standing by the center markings. It was eating the carcass of a deer, right in the middle of the road. I caught a full look at it as I passed. I asked the person sitting next to me what she saw. Without hesitation, she described exactly what I had seen. It had the face of a wolf, but the size of a bear. It stood on 2 legs and was standing over the deer like a man would. I spun the car around within 20 seconds to go back, but it was already gone. I don't have anything to gain from making this up. I saw it with my own eyes. The creature was terrifying, but at least it was eating roadkill and not stalking people. Honestly, if I had hit it with the car, at least people might believe me, but I didn't. And now it's just a story no one wants to believe. My husband had his own encounter in the fall of 1998 near Orfordville, off Old Highway 11. He was picking up speed to merge onto the highway when he saw something strange on the side of the road. At first, it was on all 4s like a wolf, but then it stood up on 2 legs and walked towards the front of his car. He said the creature had a massive muzzle and hulking. It looked directly at him, then bolted across the road on 2 legs and disappeared into the cornfield. Needless to say, my husband floored it out of there. We live in Janesville, just under an hour from Elkhorn, another place known for strange sightings. He still remembers how tall and hairy it was, around 6 feet, with a long snout and thick fur. It started on all 4s, but moved like a man once it stood up. We don't know what it was, but it was real. There are things out here we can't explain, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
All right, campers. Both sightings are just a short howl away from Elkhorn, Wisconsin, where the legend started. What gets me is the timeline. Sightings 10 years apart, same description, same region. That's not coincidence, that's territory. Coming up. While searching for the site of a deadly crash, a woman encounters a shaggy, hunched creature that runs up a cliff and vanishes.
I wanted to tell you about a supernatural experience I had about 12 years ago. I live in Southern Oregon. I was driving on Upper Applegate Road to my job at a small ranch. I had heard about a fatal accident that had occurred on that same road, something really terrible. The road is rural and very winding. As I drove, I was scanning the road to see if I could spot where the crash happened. I wasn't just curious. I wanted to be a better, more careful driver. I figured seeing the scene might remind me to stay sharp. Eventually, I came around a bend and saw horrendous skid marks all over the pavement. Right as I was looking at them, something strange happened. This dog-like creature ran across the road from my side, right over the skid marks, and headed straight into the embankment. The embankment was incredibly steep, almost a 90-degree angle, but the creature didn't hesitate. It just started climbing straight up. Then it disappeared. It didn't stop or slow down, it just vanished into the hillside like it was never there. I was driving slowly because the corner was tight and I was absolutely in shock. I'm pretty familiar with wildlife, and this was something I had never seen before, or since. It kind of resembled the chupacabra images I've seen online. It wasn't huge, but it was definitely bigger than a dog. Its body was hairy, shaggy, and hunched over. It looked dirty, almost sickly, and it moved fast, unnaturally fast. The way it climbed that steep incline wasn't normal for any animal I know. It was eerie, especially because it happened right where the fatal accident had occurred. When I arrived at the ranch, I felt really shaken. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. I kept trying to make sense of it. It was ugly, it was strange, and it had just vanished into the side of that hill. It startled me more because I was already on alert thinking about the crash. I had my mind on something tragic, not on seeing a creature. It was far enough ahead of me that I didn't need to brake suddenly, but I saw it clearly, and then, just like that, it ran up the embankment and disappeared.
Okay, that's not a coyote, and it doesn't sound like a bear. That's something else entirely. Honestly, what she described, shaggy, hunched, fast, unnatural, it lines up with so many versions of the Dogman reported in the Pacific Northwest. Not the upright werewolf type we usually hear about in Michigan and Wisconsin, but the more feral, four-legged kind. Low to the ground, hair like it's been dragged through mud. Maybe it was the reason for the tragic accident. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next, 3 friends head into the woods near Sheboygan, Michigan, only to find themselves surrounded, stalked, and hunted by something inhuman.
I'm from the Sheboygan, Michigan area. On November 24th, 2010, my two friends and I went out around midnight. We weren't hunting, but we had weapons with us. We were looking for a good spot to set up our blinds for the upcoming muzzleloading season. As we crossed a field filled with deer beddings, everything felt normal. But the next field we entered had none, completely empty. We kept going and eventually came across some kind of game trail. We decided to follow it into the woods. About 300 yards in, we started hearing heavy breathing and snapping branches in the thick brush off to our right. At first, we thought it might be coyotes. Then we reached a corner and froze in our tracks. Standing about 50 yards ahead was something darker than the woods itself. It was upright on two legs and stood between 7 and 7.5 feet tall, with a huge wolf-like head. We slowly started to back up and retreat, not wanting to turn our backs to this thing, but before we could reach the field again, the same figure appeared in front of us. We looked away for a second, then looked back. Gone. Once we got into the open field, we noticed 4 or more of these things. One stood on each corner, just watching us. We saw one of them move and hide halfway behind a tree. At this point, we were in full panic mode. As we made our way across the field, we reached the edge, and there it was. One stood directly in the middle of the trail, leading back into the woods. We ran all the way home, and we felt like we were being watched, followed, and stalked. In the field, it felt like they were trying to herd us into a corner. I haven't seen it again since, and hope to never cross paths with whatever those things were again.
Coming up, in 1971, Alabama was gripped by fear as dozens claimed to see a creature with the body of a wolf and the face of a woman. In April of 1971, residents in the suburbs of Mobile, Alabama, reported sightings of what they called a wolf woman roaming the streets at night, most famously along Davis Avenue. Witnesses claimed the creature had the upper body of a human and the lower body of a wolf, with long hair flowing down like a mane. It was said to move on all fours like a quadruped. According to a report in the local newspaper, one witness described it as a woman and wolf, pretty and hairy. Some claimed they had been chased or stalked by the creature. Others said they saw her wandering onto private property at night. The Register even published an illustration of the wolf woman in one of its articles. Although no one was harmed, law enforcement and the media took the reports seriously. Up to 50 calls were made, reporting sightings over a span of 10 days. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature vanished. No further sightings were reported. There's always a chance this was a case of mass hysteria. One person sees something strange, and soon the whole town's imagination kicks into overdrive, or maybe a few people just wanted attention. But what I find most interesting is that first sighting. Because, let's be honest, there's a big difference between someone seeing a wolf woman and someone mistaking a big ol' mountain lion. There's also an odd but intriguing theory floating around that the wolf woman might have been a feral person. The Lobo Wolf Girl of Devil's River is a documented case of a feral child, and feral kids have shown up throughout history. What really sticks out to me, though, is the where and when. This didn't happen in the remote Appalachians or some hidden backwoods. Mobile is a port city on Alabama's Gulf Coast, not far from Pensacola, Florida. It's urban, connected, and hardly the kind of place you'd expect a myth to take root, at least not in the 1970s. Okay, so here's where it gets weird. The description of this thing? Human upper body, wolf-like lower body, running on all fours? That's not just your average cryptid mashup. That lines up almost perfectly with folklore surrounding the wolf tar. Yeah, not werewolf. Wolftar. It's a lesser-known creature, part human, part wolf, but not in the Hollywood full moon sense. Think more like a centaur, but with a wolf's body instead of a horse's. These things show up in Native American legends, some Russian folktales, even bits of Norse myth, depending on how deep you dig. They're often seen as guardians, cursed spirits, or shapeshifters tied to the wild, not just supernatural. So, if someone in Mobile back in '71 actually saw a wolf tar and not just a mangy coyote, well, maybe the Gulf Coast has more secrets than we give it credit for. And hey, if you've seen something half human, half wolf, and not on a movie screen, drop me a line. Next, a midnight meetup by the river turns into a face-to-face encounter with a towering wolf-headed creature that shouldn't exist.
When I was a teenager growing up in Delta, Colorado, my friends and I used to hang out along the Gunnison River. It wasn't far from where it meets the Uncompahgre River. We had a favorite spot near an old abandoned factory. So even though the place hadn't been used in years, some of the lights around it still worked. They'd shine down on the river and the nearby shoreline, making it a strangely well-lit place for being out in the middle of nowhere. One summer night in the mid-1990s, around 12:30 a.m., I had plans to meet a friend at that spot. While I waited, I decided to explore a bit, something I did often. There was an old auto parts lot nearby, kind of a junkyard, and it always fascinated me. I've been into cars for as long as I can remember, and now I work as a mechanic. I knew the guy who owned the lot, and his German Shepherd knew me too. The dog was always friendly and sometimes wandered down to the river to hang out and play when I was there. As I started walking toward the lot, I passed this massive downed tree along the riverbank. One end of the tree had a huge tangle of exposed roots and river debris wrapped around it. That's when I noticed something. Two tall ears sticking up from the far side of the tree, just barely visible over the top. I figured it was the shepherd coming to say hi, so I called out to him. I even tossed a couple of small pebbles to get his attention. Then something stood up, and it wasn't the dog. In the glow from the factory lights, I got a crystal clear look. This thing was massive, easily 7 or 8 feet tall, and it looked like a humanoid with the head of a huge wolf. Its canine teeth were bared, and its orange-yellow eyes locked on mine. The eyes reminded me of distant lights at the end of a tunnel. Intense, unblinking, and completely unnatural. I screamed and not scared to admit it. The creature grabbed onto the exposed roots and leapt up onto the downed tree in a single motion. Now I could see all of it. It had a broad chest and long arms that looked more human than animal, except they ended in fingers tipped with long nails. Its lower body was lean and powerful, with legs shaped like a dog's but longer. It also stood on the balls of its feet like a sprinter, ready to launch. I didn't even think. I just turned and ran straight into the river. The water was shallow that time of year, so I made it across fast and scrambled up to a chain-link fence on the other side, and I looked back. The creature was still on the far shore, now down on all fours, just watching me. Thank God it didn't chase me. Instead, it turned its head and looked upriver. A second later, it took off running, on all fours, moving so fast it was gone almost instantly. I've never seen anything move like that. Not long after, I told the man who owned the auto parts lot what I saw. He didn't seem surprised. He just told me, "You should never walk by that river at night. There are things out there we can't comprehend." And the only reason I was still alive was because it chose not to harm me.
Up next, a child sees glowing eyes in the woods, but it's not a dream. Years later, the creature returns. Was it a Dogman? Or something worse?
This happened in Connecticut, about 30 minutes north of New Haven, in 2008. I actually saw this thing twice. The first time was at night. For context, when I was little, I used to stare out my bedroom window at night. The window faced a wooded grove about 100 yards from the house, and I'd often fall asleep watching the peaceful night woods. One night, when I was about 9 years old, I was doing just that, staring out the window, when I noticed 2 yellow lights in the trees. At first, I was confused, thinking maybe a car's headlights were somehow up in the trees. But the lights disappeared, then reappeared in the same spot, like they were blinking. As I kept staring, I started noticing other odd things. The tree where the lights were seemed thicker than I remembered. Then I saw it. There was a massive wolf head in the tree. The yellow lights aligned perfectly with its eyes. That's when I realized the lights weren't lights. They were eyes. I started to panic and accidentally bumped my head against the window while backing away. The moment my head hit the glass, the wolf's head suddenly turned toward me. Then, the rest of its body began emerging from behind the tree. At first, I could barely see it. It was pitch black and blended into the shadows perfectly. But as it stepped into the moonlight, I saw it more clearly. The thing was on 2 legs. The top of its head had to be at least 10 feet off the ground. It stayed in the tree line, but it was clearly visible from my window. And somehow, even in the dark, I knew it was staring right at me. I slammed the curtains shut and dove under the covers, absolutely terrified. I lay there all night, waiting to hear it clawing at the window to get me, but it never came. I stayed hidden until my alarm went off the next morning. I never told anyone. Even though I saw it with my own eyes, part of me still couldn't believe it happened. The second encounter happened 12 years later, during a 4th of July celebration. My dad and I had just finished setting off fireworks in the backyard. As we were packing up for the night, I saw it again. That same massive pitch-black wolf head was peeking out from behind the shed, glowing yellow eyes and all. The head was huge. It was easily the size of the 3-foot-wide window on that side of the house. The moment it realized I was looking at it, it quickly ducked back behind the shed. I told my dad I saw a big dog back there, and he just said it was probably coyotes. But if it was a coyote, how was it standing on 2 feet? And how did its face fill an entire window? I don't know exactly what I saw, but it matches descriptions people have given of the Dogman. Until I see something that proves otherwise, I'm going to say that's what I saw. A Dogman. It was terrifying both times. And I hope I never see anything like it again.
Next, a teen sees a massive black beast in the woods, but decades later, a shocking revelation from his brother proves he wasn't the only one.
I had an experience in my early teens. I was raised in a very small rural town in South Central Florida, a one-stoplight town. We lived in a trailer. I was the middle child of 9 siblings. One evening, I was out visiting my best friend. I remember the roads were just dirt. We liked to play outside until it got dark. On my way home that evening, I heard crackling in the woods. When I looked to see what was making the noise, a huge black wolf-like thing stood there, staring at me. I froze. I swear I stood there for at least 15 minutes. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't blink. I don't think I even breathed. This thing was massive. I grew up barefoot in the woods and was used to seeing all kinds of wildlife, but this was nothing I had ever seen before. When it finally moved, it must have snapped me out of my trance. I turned and ran as fast as I could. It was twilight. I barely had enough light to see the dirt beneath my feet, but I remember that huge black face burned into my memory. I never told my parents, never told a teacher, no one. Fast forward 25 years later, I was putting away groceries at my older brother's house. We were casually chatting about different things. Somehow the conversation shifted toward the spiritual and supernatural. I made an offhand comment, something like, "Well, at least you weren't faced with a thing that stalked the woods." My brother stopped, turned to me, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Oh, are you talking about the big black beast that was in the woods when we were kids?" I tell you, I almost fainted. We had experienced almost the exact same thing, and we never knew it. Talk about validation. I don't know what that thing was, but it felt powerful. I haven't seen anything like it since, but I will never forget that experience.
Up next, while trying to photograph the blood moon, a lone camper comes face to face with a creature that might just be Wisconsin's Dogman. The year was 2017, and there was going to be a blood moon that night. I gathered a bunch of equipment to try and get a good picture of it. I borrowed an awesome camera that could be attached to a telescope, brought my laptop, and packed various other gear. I also strapped on my .40 caliber pistol. This is Bayfield County, Wisconsin, and there are mountain lions and coyotes around. I loaded everything into my Jeep and headed to a spot a few miles outside of town. Once I arrived, I began unloading and setting up. That's when I heard some nearby sheep start freaking out. I didn't think much of it at first, but after a few minutes, they went quiet again. Just as I was unloading the scope, I heard a very loud splash from a small creek in the field that got my attention. I stood up and looked toward the creek. I didn't hear anything else, so I went back to setting up the scope. Then I heard rustling, twigs snapping, movement. I stood up again and shined my flashlight around. I didn't see anything. Whatever it was went silent when the light swept over the area, so I figured I'd scared it off. I went back to screwing the scope onto the tripod when I heard a very loud snap. I whipped around, pulling my gun and shining the light toward a fallen tree I'd noticed earlier. And there it was. It was roughly the size of a bear, but the head was distinctly canid than ursid. The body was leaner, more like a massive wolf than a bear. We just stood there staring at each other for what felt like forever. Then it growled and charged. I screamed and fired my gun over and over. Later, I found out I'd fired 8 shots. It bowled me over and I thought, this is it. I'm dead. But instead of finishing the attack, it just kept running. It disappeared into the nearby cornfield. Shaken, I threw the most expensive pieces of gear into the Jeep and got out of there. I didn't return until the sun was fully up. When I came back, there was a game warden, a couple of sheriff's deputies, and the farmer who owned the pasture. Apparently, whatever it was had killed a couple of sheep. They were trying to figure out what it was and where it had gone. The tracks it left behind were weird. Canid, but also not. They were longer than a standard dog print. I still don't know what it was, but sometimes it keeps me up at night. Some people have suggested it was a Dogman. I'm not sure I believe in that kind of thing, but after that night, I'm not sure what to believe anymore. Look, this is Wisconsin we're talking about. The Beast of Bray Road, that local legend, half man, half wolf, all nightmare, spotted for decades creeping around the back roads of Elkhorn, is very far from where you were at, but you may have just joined a very unlucky club, or a very lucky one, depending on how you look at it. You did live to tell the tale after all. For our final story of the evening, a midnight drive to a quiet Ontario cottage turns terrifying.
About 2 years ago, my fiancé and I were heading to my parents' cottage in a little town called Brighton. It's about 100 kilometers east of Oshawa, Ontario. I'd been building this 1995 5-liter Mustang since I was 15 and was eager to get it out for a long drive. When we got to the Brighton exit, I pulled off and made a left. We were driving around for about 10 minutes when something in my left peripheral caught my attention. It was moving alongside the road, in the forest, keeping pace with us while I was doing around 60 kilometers an hour. I asked my fiancé, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? Something is moving as fast as we're going in the car." Now I work in provincial corrections, so not much rattles me. But I had my 5D-cell diesel flashlight in the car, and being the tough guy I thought I was, I pulled the Mustang over to the side of the road. Keep in mind, it was around 1 a.m. in the morning. I just finished a shift, and we were heading out right after work. No streetlights, no other cars, just us. The moment I stopped the car, whatever it was in the woods stopped too. I stepped out of the car even though my fiancé was pleading with me to get back in. About 20 feet away, something was standing there. It looked like a canine, but not a normal one. It almost looked like a werewolf from the movies. Upright, tall, muscular. My fiancé said whatever it was looking right at me. I stared back. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. I didn't see anything specific like that, but it had this presence. Terrifying. Then it let out this low, strange kind of growl. And just like that, it turned and ran back into the forest. I jumped back into my Mustang and sped the rest of the way to my parents' cottage. When we got there, I told my mom and dad everything that had happened. My fiancé started talking about how in her culture, she's Native American, there are these beings called skinwalkers. Cursed people. Ones who can shift their form at night, but return to human during the day. That story has become a regular part of our cottage conversations ever since. Every time we drive up, we look to the side of the road, hoping we won't see it again, while also hoping we do. Oh, and to answer the question I'm sure you're asking, yes, it was walking upright, on 2 legs. It had pointed ears, a long snout, the whole thing. And the strangest part, I had my 110-pound Rottweiler, Mia, in the back seat. She didn't bark, didn't growl. She just stared in the same direction. Everyone in the car was stunned as I got out. I was actually terrified. I deal with violent criminals all day, guys who've done horrible things, and I still couldn't believe my eyes. The guys at work said I was hallucinating, but to this day I swear that thing was real.
That's all for tonight, dear listeners. I can't believe I've made it to the 50th episode. Thanks so much for joining me along this ride. And please remember, if you want to support this podcast and love a damn good cup of coffee, head on over to outlandscoffee.com and use code CAMPFIRE for $5 off your first order and give us a try. If you want to become a Patreon cult member to get extended episodes and other full Patreon-only episodes, you can sign up at patreon.com/campfirecultpod for only $5 a month. Until next time, I'll be leaving you in the dark where whispers linger and shadows dance. Stay weary, sleep well, and beware the whispers in the night. If you have a story to tell, please reach out via email at contact@campfirecultpod.com or leave me a voicemail message at 720-297-8608. You can follow us anywhere on social media at Campfire Cult Pod and online at campfirecultpod.com. And finally, if you don't mind, please rate and review wherever possible.